Upbeat, friendly music starts, then abruptly cuts to a dark, ominous drone. You walk into your favorite bakery. The smell of fresh bread, sweet pastries, it's comforting. You ask for a dozen donuts, and the person behind the counter smiles, packing a box with 13. That little extra one. A bonus. A sign of generosity, right? Wrong. That 13th item, it has a name. The Vantage Loaf. And it wasn't a gift. It was insurance. A desperate shield against brutal, medieval punishment. To understand why, we have to go back to a time when bread wasn't just food, it was power. Welcome to 13th century England. Life is hard. Famine is common. The price of wheat, the very grain that keeps society from starving, is volatile. And when people are hungry, they get angry. They look for someone to blame. And the easiest person to blame? The baker. The one who turns that precious, expensive grain into the daily bread that everyone needs to survive. Accusations flew, he's using less flour. This loaf is lighter than yesterday's. He's robbing us to line his own pockets. King Henry III heard these cries. To quell the unrest, he enacted a law in 1266 called the Assize of Bread and Ale. It wasn't a friendly consumer protection law. It was a decree, written with an iron fist. It strictly regulated the weight of a loaf of bread relative to the price of grain. And the punishments for breaking this law? They weren't a slap on the wrist. If a baker was caught selling bread that was even slightly underweight, they faced utter ruin. This wasn't a fine you could just pay off. For a first offense, you could be flogged through the streets of your own town. For repeat offenses, you could be dragged through the dirt on a hurdle, or locked in the public pillory for hours, a target for ridicule, rotten fruit, and filth. And in some of the most extreme interpretations and guilds, the penalty for a cheating baker was even more gruesome. The loss of a hand. The very hand that kneaded the dough. A permanent brand of shame and a death sentence for your career. Now, here's the baker's nightmare. Baking isn't an exact science, especially not in the 13th century. How much moisture evaporates in the oven? How much does the yeast cause it to rise? A baker could be completely honest, yet still produce loaves of slightly different weights by accident. Imagine the terror. Every single sale was a gamble. Any customer could be a royal inspector in disguise. The scales weren't just a tool of the trade, they were an instrument of judgment, deciding between prosperity and public flogging. So the bakers, terrified of falling short, came up with a clever, desperate solution. Instead of aiming for exactly 12, they would bake a 13th loaf for every dozen sold. This Vantage loaf was their margin of error. If an inspector bought a dozen and weighed the whole batch, the extra loaf ensured the total weight was well over the legal minimum. It was a self-imposed tax, a sacrifice made to the god of the scales to avoid a brutal punishment. It wasn't generosity. It was fear. Over centuries, the brutal laws faded. The punishments softened. But the custom remained. The baker's fear slowly transformed into a tradition, and that tradition eventually became mistaken for generosity. So the next time you get a baker's dozen, remember its dark and desperate origin. That 13th treat isn't just a sweet bonus. It's the ghost of a brutal law. It's the echo of a medieval baker's terror, a man so afraid of the pillory and the lash that he gave away his product, just to be safe. You're not just getting a free donut. You're tasting history.